This is CBC Here and Now.
Tonight, we have our first look at video of the shooter in Nova Scotia's mass killing.
Caroline Family Court was blocked before the pandemic started. That certainly hasn't changed. The lesson? Maybe it's time our courts modernized.
Good evening, I'm Carolyn Stokes. We start tonight with more good news in the fight against COVID-19 in this province. Not only are there no new cases today, but the one case recorded on Saturday was actually a clerical error. So that means it's been 5 days straight without a case. But officials are warning that easing restrictions will be more challenging than it was to introduce the restrictions. Peter Cowan is live to break it all down for us. So Peter, what did they tell us today?
Carolyn, they basically said the reason the numbers have been low is because of the restrictions that are in place, but they are working out a plan about exactly how they might be able to lift these restrictions, but it's not as easy as you might think. Here's how Dr. Janice Fitzgerald explained it.
Our public health officials are actively investigating how best to relax some of our public health measures, and determining how and when to loosen these measures is much more difficult and more important than putting them in place in many ways. We are trying to achieve a balance between protecting the public and giving back some of the freedom that we have all temporarily lost due to COVID-19. We want to get this right.
So the concern is if you ease the restrictions too much, then you see another outbreak of the disease. Some of the first things they are talking about are, for example, restarting surgeries that have been put on hold. If you're wondering what are going to be the last things, well, the health minister said today, people mingling together and travel are the two biggest risks. So he says those sort of prohibitions are going to have to be in place for a whole lot longer.
Okay, now you were asking about some statistics today on how the virus is spreading. What did you learn about that?
Right, and the key number that I wanted to get was for every person who has COVID-19, how many people are they infecting? And the answer was 0.4. So one person only ends up infecting 0.4 people. That seems a bit odd, so let me just run through the numbers for a larger group. So if we started with 10 people, then we find out that they only infect 4 people. From there, you see 1.6 people get infected, so just fewer than the 2 you see on screen. And finally, it's 2/3 of a person gets infected. So you can see how quickly, with the current measures we have in place, the virus eventually essentially dies out. If you compare that to Europe, where at the height of their outbreak, the number was more like 4, so every 1 person infects 4, so you then end up with those 10 people infect 40, who infect 160. So without measures, you can see how quickly that virus spreads. So Carolyn, really, it's just a number that helps us show how effective we've been with the current measures at preventing the disease from spreading.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Peter. That's Here and Now's Peter Cowan reporting live from the newsroom. Tonight, we have the first visuals of Nova Scotia shooter Gabriel Wortman on the day of the killings, and it shows him posing as an RCMP officer. Now, this video was captured by a security camera on Highway 2 at 10:55 a.m. on Sunday. It shows Wortman exiting his fake RCMP vehicle. He takes off his jacket and puts on a reflective vest before driving south. He was killed by police at roughly 12 p.m. in Enfield, an hour after this video was captured. About an hour ago, the RCMP provided an update saying they believe the shooter acted alone, but they are investigating whether anyone helped him leading up to the rampage. The RCMP also responded to criticisms about why the force didn't issue widespread public alerts instead of choosing to use Twitter. Several families of victims say they don't use Twitter and therefore didn't know about the danger. The RCMP says Twitter is its usual platform for alerting people.
We use Twitter to alert residents of a firearms complaint in the Portapique area and to stay in. As we searched the area, we discovered additional victims and several structure fires. We established a perimeter, and our search continued into the evening and early morning hours on Sunday. In response to new information indicating that the suspect was not in the secure perimeter, at 8:02 a.m. on Sunday, the RCMP began providing real-time information on its Nova Scotia RCMP Twitter account.
Memorials have been set up near Portapique, where the shooting started Saturday night. Today, one man returned to the area to get his car, and he spoke to CBC. His brother was killed by the shooter, and he says he was nearly a victim himself.
And I walked up the road looking for my brother with a flashlight. My father come with me so far, but he stopped at the end of his driveway and turned around and went back in his house. I walked up looking for my brother with a flashlight. And I could see a body laying on the side of the road. As I got closer, I could see it was my brother. I got one more step closer, I could see blood, and he wasn't moving. I shut my flashlight off, I turned around and I ran for my life in the dark. I turned around and looked down towards the road I had just run from to see a little flashlight flashing around looking for me. I ran so hard into the woods, I laid there for approximately at least about 4 hours hoping and praying that the police would come. Finally, after about 4 hours, they got me out of there with an armored vehicle. A nightmare through hell. Laying there for hours, all I could hear was explosions from the fires and gunshots coming from all around me. Yeah. It was the most terrifyingest thing I've ever experienced in my life. To walk up and find my brother dead, and to be hunted by this fella that killed all these people. I'll be traumatized for the rest of my life.
Well, just ahead at 6:30 Newfoundland time, our colleagues with CBC Nova Scotia will have the latest on the shooting and more details on the victims. You can also add your name to a virtual book of condolences. The Nova Scotia government has an online book you can sign to honor anyone who lost their lives this past weekend. Just go to the website novascotia.ca/condolences. Well, an RCMP officer in Bay Roberts says she became a police officer because of Constable Heidi Stevenson, who was killed while responding to the shooting rampage in Nova Scotia.
I wouldn't be in this career. I wouldn't be here in life if it wasn't for that moment in time about 9 years ago. And, you know, she definitely set me on a good path.
That moment in time she mentioned, well, that was when Sarah Bass first met Constable Stevenson. Bass was a 21-year-old university student and was looking for a house to rent with friends. Constable Stevenson became her landlord, and so much more. Bass was at a crossroads, not knowing what kind of career she wanted. She chose law enforcement because of Constable Stevenson, who guided her during training.
And then she walked in, she cut the corner, and the smile was, you know, stretching from ear to ear, and just her personality. And, you know, and I look back and I described it as whatever she was selling that day, I think I would have bought. So whatever career that day that she was going to sell me, but she sold the RCMP, and just the way she did it with her personality and how highly she talked about it.
Well, there's a Canada emergency response package for people who lost their paychecks, and an emergency wage subsidy to help companies cover payroll for idled workers. And today, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced an emergency student benefit for those who may not have lost a job but can't get one during this pandemic shutdown.
With this benefit, you'll get $1,250 a month from May to August. And if you take care of someone else or have a disability, that amount will go up to $1,750 each month.
The $9 billion package is designed for post-secondary students. Students who work but earn less than $1,000 a month also qualify. In addition, 76,000 job placements are being created for youth in sectors needing a hand because of the pandemic. And that may be in agriculture or the manufacturing of protective equipment or services for vulnerable populations. Students who sign on could be paid up to $5,000 over the summer, depending on how many hours worked. Well, fish harvesters in this province are facing a stream of worries as they prepare for a possible fishing season. As Here and Now's Garrett Berry explains, there are questions at every turn.
Cleanup day, a pretty lonely one.
Usually this place to be involved. Well, usually these wharves would be empty because we'd be fishing by now.
The boats are tied up and no one knows when this season is even going to begin. That's just the start of it.
We're set up to have a pretty good year. Our markets were great, but now, everything is so up in the air, and there are no easy answers.
Fishermen should soon find out what price they'll get for their crab. Sullivan isn't optimistic.
It's not that the market isn't there, it's just like there isn't a restaurant open from here to Tokyo.
High stakes for some who need a good price to claim EI and make it through winter.
Most people are fairly certain that theirs is going to go right out of the price, so what happens if it does and people don't qualify for EI?
The concerns stretch right across the province.
And I'm just hoping that the crab fishery is not going to be the only thing that we're going to have to try and make a livelihood on this year.
And the money is only half of it.
And this virus, to me, is like a shadow hanging over you. You've got to worry about that every day. Not just when you're out working, but when you're in a store, when you're out in public in general, you have to worry about this virus.
The deck of this boat is about 15 feet long. And here are the 6 feet that everybody's supposed to be keeping from each other. Put 4 or 5 people up on that deck and you start to see just how complicated that can get.
2 meters, you'll never do it. We don't have the room.
Pick up one loop and place it over one ear.
Experts say gloves and masks can help, but if you're hauling up crab pots,
you got water coming in your face, sometimes mud coming in your face, and it's just not practical.
Make no mistake, she wants to go fishing.
We have 3 enterprises and we're only young fish harvesters, but we've got quite a bit invested.
But the question is, can this boat get in the water safely and earn enough to make ends meet? Garrett Berry, CBC News, Gambo.
Well, yesterday on Here and Now, we talked about some of the tangly situations during a pandemic when it comes to separated parents and who gets to have the children at a time like this. Joining me once again is Melanie Del Rizzo. She is a lawyer who practices primarily in family law. So, Melanie, give me a sense, what's it like actually practicing family law and dealing with parents on difficult issues during a pandemic?
Well, it's extremely difficult because there's every single situation is different, and you're going to have to give advice to your clients. Again, the advice is going to be, unless there are extraordinary risks, that the parenting situation should be maintained. The question is, what risks are extraordinary? As long as the child is safe, my understanding is at the present time, applications aren't being heard. So you have that struggle right now.
Is there room for technology? I mean, we're using FaceTime, people are using Zoom and Skype or whatever they can. Can the courts find a different way of dealing with these kinds of matters now?
Well, at the present time, they do use some limited discretionary use of telephone when the courts are open, if there's a party who can't be present, sometimes in extraordinary circumstances. The courts don't have the technology, at least here they don't, to really do a whole lot by video. I understand that a lot of the child protection matters that are proceeding and the emergent matters are going on by phone, even full-day hearings, which has its own problems.
And I guess you can't just use the same kind of technology we use in our social distancing to stay in touch with families, because there's a security issue as well, right?
Yes, security and confidentiality is extremely important to the integrity of the court system.
So you take a look, for instance, just the way the CBC and NTV and all of us in the media are doing jobs differently. The school system, now you've got teachers who are taking their classes and doing them online. What's your sense as a lawyer who practices here as to what the potential is for this pandemic to change the way courts handle these matters?
Well, I think that really it's a potential for us all to look at how we can modernize. The issue, I'm sure, is going to be financial. We're going to see a big financial issues with the government coming up, and the provincial government will be the one that will be responsible for funding these sorts of projects, and I can see that might be an issue. Certainly, I think we all need to find the silver lining in everything that we're doing now. That's the only thing we can do. For family lawyers, I think we're going to have to become more reliant on mediation and arbitration and other alternative dispute resolution processes which can proceed over video conferencing apps and whatnot. And maybe that will help alleviate some of the stress on the court system moving forward if we become more used to using these sorts of processes.
Melanie Del Rizzo, no matter when this ends, I hope your caseload is not too overwhelming, although who knows when that's going to be. Really appreciate your time tonight and yesterday. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Well, construction on the West White Rose project will not resume this year, throwing hundreds of construction workers into limbo. Husky Energy confirmed it began demobilizing 2 construction sites in Newfoundland and Labrador about a month ago because of COVID-19 concerns. One of the sites is in Placentia, the other is in Marystown. In a statement, Husky says construction on the project is suspended for the rest of 2020 and they don't know when it will restart. More and more people are opting to wear masks in public to prevent the transmission of COVID-19. But for those who are hard of hearing, that brings a new challenge. As Here and Now's Heather Gillis reports, the situation is especially difficult in a medical setting, particularly for one expectant mother.
Erica Breen Hearn is having a baby at the end of April. She's hard of hearing and wears hearing aids in both ears.
I also rely heavily on lip reading and also facial cues.
As more people wear masks to limit COVID-19, it's harder for Breen Hearn to understand what people are saying.
Opens up for miscommunication and just basically not being comfortable for me to be able to communicate freely with my medical providers.
Something she says adds another level of stress, anxiety, and concern at doctor's appointments.
I'm also not allowed to have a support person to rely on either. When I go in for labor and delivery, as it stands right now, I can, but for my regular appointments, I'm not able to.
According to Eastern Health, only children, people needing physical assistance, or those with a cognitive impairment can have a support person at appointments, which would leave Breen Hearn without. However, in an email, Eastern Health now says that people who are hard of hearing will be allowed to have a support person at the hospital.
If that's true, then that's fantastic.
Leon Mills, the executive director of the Canadian Hard of Hearing Association in this province, says hard of hearing people already feel socially isolated due to their communication challenges.
With this kind of environment now, that's even compounded more so, and I think that's causing people, can cause people quite a bit of more stress than usual and mental health problems.
Both Mills and Breen Hearn say a mask with a clear window in the front would be helpful for people who are hard of hearing. However, with current PPE shortages, they both acknowledge that may not be an option. Heather Gillis, CBC News, St. John's.
This weather update is brought to you by the Healthcare Foundation Home Lottery. Bonus deadline is midnight, Friday, May 15th. Order tickets now at hcfhomelottery.ca.
Ashley is here now with a look at the weather forecast, and it was a beautiful start to the day in St. John's, but it looks like it might be cooling down out there now.
It's freezing out here now, at least it is for me. I was out here this afternoon. It was lovely. Temperatures were beautiful, and most areas actually did see a lovely afternoon. Let's take a look at those temperatures this afternoon. Sitting around 8 degrees was the warmest we reached in St. John's. A number of areas, including Twillingate, Terra Nova, seeing double-digit temperatures. Gander, high near 8 degrees, and 9 for Corner Brook. And then we got those temperatures near 6 degrees for Cartwright too. So a lovely afternoon for sure. And as we headed through the morning hours, we did see that rain and cloud cover move in, especially for the southwest. That's going to continue to spread across the island as we head through the overnight tonight. We're going to see those winds ramp up a little bit as well. And we'll see potential, or more than likely going to see some rain-snow mix through areas of central and then up through the northern peninsula as well as the interior. So as far as rainfall goes, it does look like the southern areas of Newfoundland will see the most amount of snow. Rain rather, between 10 to as much as 20 millimeters. Northern Avalon to the Bonavista Peninsula, you're looking at about 10 millimeters. Otherwise, it looks like 5 or less millimeters of rain is expected tonight. The Strait, especially on the Labrador side, you're looking at anywhere from 5 to 10 centimeters of snow. And we'll see that snow head towards the coast as we head towards the morning hours. And then it's the northern portion of Labrador that is in for some snow and some gusty winds as well. About 5 to 10 centimeters with winds gusting upwards of about 60 kilometers per hour. Otherwise, across the island, tomorrow, pretty quiet day. Just some flurries possible, some scattered flurries possible with some peaks of sun as well. Areas along the west coast, you'll probably stay cloudy. You could pick up a few centimeters as well through the day, and then quiet again through Labrador, just scattered flurries and a few peaks of sun for you. But temperatures will be a little bit cooler, 5-6 degrees in the east, and then the west, you're looking at about 1 to 3 degrees, and then another mild day for areas up through Labrador, especially central and the coast. Winds across the island, though, are going to stay breezy out of the southwest, about 30 to as much as 50 kilometers per hour through the day. Heading into Friday, warming slightly, but pretty much the same forecast. Still looking at the potential for some flurries with a few peaks of sun in the mix. And then we're pretty much watching Saturday. It's going to, the low pressure, it looks like a low pressure system will affect us. It's going to take the same track it did yesterday, mainly affecting eastern areas of Newfoundland. So just something to watch. Looks like snow quickly and then changing over to rain. It'll be over into the afternoon on Saturday. So good news there. But just wanted to share this photo with you. A bluebird day in Twillingate earlier, or rather in the middle of last weekend. Thank you to Judy Hillier for sending that in. And if you have any weather photos to share with us, send them to nlphotos@cbc.ca.
Gorgeous, not a cloud in the sky. Thank you so much, Ashley. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Truck drivers in Port aux Basques continue to receive free meals, compliments of the Salvation Army. Volunteers with the church have been making home-cooked meals twice a day for the last month. The church works with Marine Atlantic to see how many drivers are leaving the terminal during each crossing and then cooks enough food for all of them.
It's nice to be appreciated. We can't forget our other sector workers either, like our nurses and doctors and everything else. And even the people, even like the workers at Tim Hortons and Irving's and stuff, they're just as important as everybody else. But they weren't there for the services open. Well, even harder on us.
Well, before we leave you tonight, we're just going to show you some video of a world-class fiddler in Nova Scotia, Natalie McMaster. Here she is performing Amazing Grace as a tribute to the victims of the mass killings. McMaster shared the video on Facebook. She said she offers her prayers and music to all of those affected by this tragedy. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. Coming up next, CBC Nova Scotia will have the latest on the investigation into the mass killings in Nova Scotia and more stories about the victims. Good night.